Hello everyone, and welcome to my first official video. This video is essentially going to be a more ad-lib style. I know that my channel intro video was a little robotic, and I want to try and fix that. So my first video is going to be about the people who inspire me, the people who make me think the most, and who make me think the most critically, essentially. And before I get to the list of people who I admire most, I'm going to tell you about why they're on this list of people that I admire most. And to do that, I have assembled a sort of a list of principles that each of these people hold. They're not all exactly the same 100%, but the same fundamental ideas, I believe, are all there. And the first thing on this list of principles is a strong moral compass. So each of these people has absolutely no qualms whatsoever with saying what they think is true. I put a lot of emphasis on true for a reason, and I'll get to that a little bit later. The second item on this list of principles is the fearlessness to discuss any subject. One thing I don't see in a lot of people is that willingness to talk about these difficult topics in a cool and even-keeled manner. A lot of people have lost the purpose of a discussion. I think it should be to find what is true, and the only way to find what is true will pretty much tie in with these third and fourth principles I'm about to discuss. The third principle I see in this list of people who inspire me is the encouragement of discussion without censorship. And that flows right into the fourth point on this list of principles, where each person pretty much always openly asks to be proven wrong on a subject. And that's something I think is really important, because if you don't ask to be proven wrong, you're never going to know if you are wrong. Or worse, you're going to be one of those people that is so grounded in your belief, you will refuse to acknowledge actual truth when it slaps you in the face. And the last thing on this list that I'm going to talk about is the belief in the individual. Every person I'm about to mention, it shouldn't be a surprise that they have a firm belief in the individual and almost entirely reject collectivist culture. With those 5 principles in place, I'm actually going to move on to the individuals, and I know this is a pretty short list. I'm sure there are a million other things I could have included once you know who these people are, but for the sake of time, we're going to move forward. And before I go on, I just want to preface that this list of people is in no particular order. The first person I'm going to talk about is clinical psychologist Dr. Jordan B. Peterson. Dr. Peterson easily makes this list for a couple of reasons. The first reason is his compassion for his fellow man. Now, I know that sounds kind of weird, because you could say that, like, well, a lot of people feel the compassion for their fellow man. But I don't quite see the same emotion. I don't quite see the same emotion in others as I see in Dr. Peterson. For example, there's a scene of him going around where he was in a radio station talking with a host, and even to the host's surprise, that Dr. Peterson actually begins crying because he just thinks of how sad it is that even though people write him to tell him how much his words of encouragement mean to those boys, he thinks it's so sad that some video on the internet is the reason they feel encouraged. And if you haven't seen that clip, I really recommend that you go look it up and see exactly what I mean. You can see the pain in his face when he talks about this kind of thing. The second reason he made this list is because of his resourcefulness when finding information to prove his point. For example, he looks into the serotonin levels of lobsters just to prove the fact that dominance hierarchies are not only found in white culture, they're actually older than trees and have been found in nature. The next person to make this list is Karen Straughen. Now, if you don't know who Karen Straughen is by name, you've probably seen some of her speeches or at least heard some of her talking points. And the reason she makes this list is because that girl is just a spitfire. She has absolutely no qualms whatsoever with calling people out if they fuck up. If you say something like wrong or contradictory, or if you do something out of line, she'll put you back in line real quick. And that's definitely something I have a lot of respect for, because some people might dance around the issue, and she just doesn't waste any time. The third person to make this list is Dr. Thomas Sowell. Dr. Sowell has been called one of the best thinkers of our time, and after reading some of his books, it's not hard to see why. For example, in his book Black Rednecks and White Liberals, it absolutely astounded me that he has the ability to find the same culture across different groups of people in different locations around the world across centuries. And beyond this, he knows how to track the cultures, so he can show if one goes on to succeed and one goes on to fail, and they're both sort of still relevant today, for example. He can tell you exactly which traits, if adopted by the failing culture, would help them succeed. And he makes this point in his book by talking about imperialist Japan after the Second World War. They went from a very backward society to a very technologically advanced society in a relatively short period of time, after they adopted some of the Western civilization culture. And I really recommend reading these books and articles so you can get the full context of what I'm talking about. And at this point, I'm just going to start naming some of the other people who inspire me to think without going too much into their background. Some of the conservative speakers that make this list are Ben Shapiro and Dinesh D'Souza. One of the things that really drew me to both of these speakers was their fearlessness when it came to the Q&A section of their speeches. Recently, I found that a good Q&A section is actually one of my favorite parts of these speeches because I really enjoy the back and forth people have when they genuinely ask questions of the speakers because it helps move the conversation forward. Some of the other people to make this list are people like Milo Yiannopoulos, Gavin McInnes, and Steven Crowder. While today I focus more on what is being said in a conversation, back in 2016 when I first started to get political, I focused more on how things were being said. And I don't think I'm unique in this regard. I think people like Milo, Gavin, and Steven are really good at getting people first interested in the conversation. And then they later work their way to people like Ben Shapiro, Dr. Sowell, Dr. Peterson, and Karen Straughen, and then they stay for the conversation. And I don't mean to say that people like Gavin, Milo, and Steven are people who you can't have a good conversation with. I just think that there's more information to be had from people like Dr. Peterson and Dr. Sowell who have actually written books on various subjects. And then there's the YouTube side of the debate. I found that the people who spend the most time getting down to the nitty-gritty details of a conversation are the people who have small to medium-sized YouTube channels. People like Sargon of Akkad, Bering, Nuance Bro, Lauren Southern, and Matt Christiansen have really been excellent at keeping my attention while providing great content to learn from. Sargon does this on a routine basis against groups like Antifa, while Nuance Bro, in my opinion, who has eclipsed Flecka's talks, does a great job at showing entire conversations that he has with people at rallies rather than just playing the hits. And then there's Lauren Southern, mid-20s, and she's taking on Canada, South Africa, and the UK pretty much all at once. And to close this video out, rather than name more people who I agree with, I'm going to say that the people who I learn most from are the people who I disagree with. When I first started getting into politics back in 2016, it wasn't the people who I agreed with who actually got me interested in the conversation. It was the people who I disagreed with but didn't know enough to disprove. 2 years later, I wouldn't call myself an intellectual giant, but it really does give me hope to know that the ideas I have a wealth of information to back them up from people who were, at one point in time, just like me, a no-name guy striving to pursue truth. I greatly look forward to the many conversations I'll have on this channel, both with people I agree with and with people I disagree with. And just a heads up guys, the next few videos that I have planned are going to be more individual based in theme like this one rather than going on current political events. But if there's another topic you'd like to hear my opinion on, I am more than happy to consider making a video on it if I feel the response in the comments isn't sufficient. And as always, thanks for stopping by.